That feeling, that kind of inner nudge to go deeper, to really get the why behind things. Well, that's exactly why we're here for this deep dive today. We're tackling a really big concept, something we're calling source all.
Yeah, it's a fascinating idea a listener brought to us, and it's really got layers. Think of source all as this fundamental human current, almost like a universal engine,
Right.
driving us towards a positive existence. It covers wanting well-being, trying to avoid or lessen suffering, and deep down, that hope for a long, fulfilling life.
Exactly. And it's not just like a simple wish. It feels more like this complex, interconnected force, something that's been shaping our personal choices, yeah, but also the big sweep of human history. What's really cool about this deep dive is the sheer range of sources the listener gave us. We're talking history, philosophy, biology, psychology, sociology, ethics, even AI.
Right, and the interdisciplinary view is so important because source all, it doesn't just live in one box. It touches everything. So our mission today really is to get to the heart of it. We want to look at where it comes from, how it impacts all these different parts of life, and maybe even what role something like AI might play down the line.
Okay, let's start unpacking that. Maybe go way back to the historical roots of this source all drive.
Yeah.
It seems like in the early days, a lot of our motivation was just about staying alive, right? Simple survival.
That's right. If you look at some early psychology, think Darwin. He talked about emotional reactions evolving to help us survive, adapt to our environment. Or McDougall with his idea of instincts, these innate drives pushing us towards certain actions when we have basic needs. Even William James, his instinct theory had this long list, but a lot of it focused on things that help us survive, like, a parent protecting their child, innate stuff.
So the real basics: safety, food, shelter. Makes sense. But what happened as societies got more complex? When those fundamental needs, hopefully, were being met more often, did this source all drive just change or grow?
It definitely broadened out. Maslow's hierarchy is a pretty good way to think about it. Once you get past the physiological needs, the safety needs, your focus shifts, right, towards belonging, esteem, and then these higher things like self-actualization, maybe even transcendence. The whole pursuit of well-being becomes, more complex. We also see this difference emerge between, say, purely biological drives, hunger, thirst, and the more socio-personal ones, things like wanting approval, needing to achieve things, even just, trying to avoid risks.
Right. So it's not just about getting enough food anymore. It becomes about feeling connected, feeling valued, feeling like you're contributing something. Okay, so a big piece of the source all seems to be about avoiding the negative side, avoiding suffering. Where do we see that playing out historically?
Oh, all through history. Humanitarianism is a great example. It starts with, basic kindness in early groups. And it grows into this huge global thing aimed at reducing suffering, upholding dignity. And the science around compassion is interesting, too. It suggests it might not just be learned behavior. There's some thinking that it's actually an innate human trait, something that helped groups cooperate, protect the vulnerable, which, gave them an evolutionary edge.
That's a really interesting angle, that caring for others might have actually helped us survive as a species. And this desire to reduce suffering, it seems to pop up across different cultures and religions, too.
Absolutely. Look at Buddhism. It talks about desire being the root of suffering and offers a path to deal with that. Or Christian teachings emphasizing service to the sick or those in need. Even ancient Greeks like Aristotle or the Stoics, they grappled with compassion, maybe from different philosophical angles, but they saw its importance.
And it's interesting, too, how our understanding of suffering has shifted over time. Like seeing it as punishment, maybe, or a reward, or just a result of our own cravings, or even something that can lead to growth.
Exactly. And you see that reflected practically in things like the humanist push for universal health care, or just the amazing progress in medicine. That's a very direct attempt to tackle suffering caused by disease, even if, historically, access wasn't always fair.
Okay, so we want to feel good, we want to avoid feeling bad. What about just sticking around longer? This desire to prolong life, how does that factor into source all?
Oh, that's been around forever, it feels like. You see it in ancient myths about immortality, right? And the ongoing scientific quest to push the boundaries of the human lifespan. Modern science is really focused on medicine, biotech, understanding aging itself. But that pursuit comes with its own baggage. Questions about biological limits, overpopulation, what happens to society if people live radically longer lives. It's complicated.
It is interesting you hear such different takes on it. Some people dream of living forever, others are just hoping for good health in their later years. Quality over quantity, maybe.
Exactly. And scientifically, average life expectancy has shot up incredibly. But there's a lot of debate about how much further we can realistically push it, at least, in the near future, the public definitely seems interested in longer lives, but usually with the caveat of healthy longer lives. Quality matters. And of course, the whole idea of radical life extension just throws up massive social, political, economic, moral questions. Our own experiences, what we read about science, it all shapes how we feel about wanting to live longer.
Wow, this is getting deep. So we're driven towards good feelings, away from bad feelings, maybe towards a longer life. But what is good feeling? What is this well-being source all pushes us towards? It seems like philosophy territory.
You're absolutely right. Philosophers have been wrestling with that for ages. What makes a life good? Some theories focus on pleasure, hedonism. Others say it's about getting what you desire. Still others point to achieving certain objective goods, things like knowledge, friendship, or developing our human capacities.
You mentioned different schools of thought there.
Yeah. Broadly, you could say three main ones. Hedonism, pleasure is the main goal. Desire satisfaction theory. Well-being is getting what you want. And objectiveless theories. Some things are just good for us, like knowledge or relationships, whether we want them or enjoy them at the moment or not. Then you have traditional views. Western thought often contrasts that pleasure focus, the hedonic view, with eudaimonia, which isn't just fleeting happiness, it's more like flourishing, living a meaningful, virtuous life, reaching your potential. Eastern philosophies like Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, they offer different frames, maybe emphasizing harmony, detachment, living in tune with nature.
It's fascinating how many ways people have tried to define living well. And this idea of wellness, it seems like it has deep roots too, not just a modern trend.
Definitely. Think about ancient systems like Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine. They always had this holistic view, mind, body, spirit, all connected. The modern wellness movement kind of builds on that. And then positive psychology came along more recently, really shifting the focus in psychology. Instead of just fixing problems, it started asking, how do people flourish? What makes life good? Building on earlier humanistic ideas. And all along, researchers across fields have been trying to figure out how to understand and even measure this thing we call well-being.
Okay, so one side is striving for this positive state, well-being. The other is trying to get rid of the negative suffering. And there's a whole ethical angle that really prioritizes that, right?
Right.
Suffering-focused ethics.
Exactly. That viewpoint says reducing suffering should be our main moral goal. Sometimes even arguing it's more urgent than promoting happiness. It takes different forms, like negative consequentialism, basically. Focus on stopping bad stuff more than just creating good stuff. Or deontological approaches, which talk about duties. Maybe we have a moral duty to reduce suffering regardless of the overall outcome.
And this isn't just about humans, is it?
No, often it extends moral concern to all sentient beings, any being capable of feeling pain or suffering. So, non-human animals are included. The focus is often on really severe suffering, arguing that our duty to stop that is especially strong. The moral response involves paying attention, feeling compassion, and then actually doing something. It's distinct from some other ethical frameworks, though it might overlap with parts of, say, utilitarianism, which also cares about outcomes.
Which leads right into another big ethical question, our obligation to help others. If we're all trying to avoid suffering, does that mean we have to help others avoid it too?
Yeah, most moral theories seem to agree on that point, at least to some extent, that we do have an obligation to help people in need, especially if we can do it without, huge risk or cost to ourselves. Kant called it an imperfect duty, to help highlighting that caring about others' well-being is important. Often it comes down to shared humanity, cooperation, needing each other to survive and thrive as a society. Think about the Good Samaritan parable. That's a classic illustration.
Where's the line? I mean, how far does that obligation go? Strangers?
Yeah.
People far away? That feels tricky.
It is tricky. There's a lot of debate about the scope. How do you balance justice or the greater good with individual freedom? What about just the duty not to cause harm? And distinguishing moral responsibility from causal responsibility is key too. Just because you didn't cause the problem doesn't mean you don't have a moral reason to help. But yeah, some people challenge the whole idea of a universal obligation, asking, when does not acting become morally wrong? It's complex.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly. We've talked drive, goals, ethics. But what's actually going on inside us during all this? What can psychology tell us about the emotions tied up with sourceall?
Psychology gives us a really rich picture of our emotional world. Emotion itself is, it's complicated. It's subjective experience. It's physiological changes in your body. It's how you behave outwardly. Feelings are more like our conscious awareness of those emotions. And moods are those long-lasting, maybe less intense states. We often talk about basic emotions, sadness, happiness, fear, anger, surprise, disgust, which seem pretty universal, actually.
And there are different ideas about how those emotions even come about.
Several key theories, yeah. James Lange said physical reactions come first, then we label the emotion based on the bodily feedback. Canonbard argued the physical response and the emotional feeling happen at the same time. And appraisal theory really emphasizes our thinking. How we interpret a situation shapes the emotion we feel. The brain's crucial, obviously. The amygdala, especially, is a key player in processing emotions. We tend to sort emotions into positive or negative, and they all serve functions: survival, well-being. And from a sociology angle, it's important to remember emotions aren't just internal. They're shaped by our culture, social norms, interactions. Context matters.
Let's zero in on a couple of key emotions for Sorsal. Happiness, obviously, is a big goal. What's the psychological take?
Happiness.
Yeah, that state we all seem to chase. It's very subjective, first off. Influenced by our genes, our life situations, but also very much by our mindset. Things like gratitude, good relationships, mindfulness, having a sense of purpose. These consistently pop up as factors linked to happiness. Biologically, you've got neurotransmitters involved: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, those feel-good chemicals. And research really backs this up. Strong social ties, purpose, gratitude, mindfulness, physical health. They're pretty reliable predictors.
And then the flip side, sadness. Often what Sorsal is trying to move us away from.
Right. Sadness is universal too, usually triggered by some kind of loss. It can be mild disappointment or, deep grief. It actually serves a purpose, often signaling to others that we need support, need help. Lots of things can cause it: stress, personality, our history, hormones, feeling lonely, substance use, being physically ill. And it's important to note, if sadness sticks around for a long time or feels really intense, it could be a sign of something more serious, like depression. Then there's anger. That feels like a really natural response when our Sorsal goals get blocked or threatened.
Exactly. Anger is that negative emotional reaction to feeling challenged, or like something stopping you from getting what you need or want, that Sorsal drive. Triggers are numerous: stress, feeling disrespected, unfairness, criticism, threats, frustration, pain, even old unresolved stuff. Psychologically, things like negative thinking patterns, trouble managing emotions, past trauma can all feed into anger. And that can sometimes lead to aggression, which might be impulsive or maybe more calculated. Aggression itself can stem from fear, anxiety, unmet needs, trauma, pain, confusion, feeling out of control. Biology, psychology, what we learn socially, it all plays a role in aggressive behavior.
It's really striking how these basic emotions, so core to how we individually experience Sorsal, also have these big cultural layers.
Oh, absolutely. While some basic emotions and how we show them on our faces seem pretty universal, there are huge differences across cultures in how intensely people feel them, how they express them, even how much value the culture places on certain emotions. Culture shapes how we react to things like trauma, how grief is expressed. Some cultures value high-energy emotions, others prefer calmer states. And then you have cultural norms, these unwritten display rules about who can show what emotion, when, and how. They really influence how we manage our feelings. Even how we interpret someone else's emotion can be culturally filtered. So yeah, understanding those cultural nuances is vital if you want a full picture of how Sorsal plays out globally.
And speaking of culture, it seems like our ethics around Sorsal, what's right, what's wrong, in pursuing well-being or dealing with suffering, are also really shaped by society.
That's a crucial point. Moral practices vary so much across cultures. It makes you ask, are there any universal ethical rules, or is it mostly about what a particular culture decides? Social norms about right and wrong are baked into a culture, and they change over time, place to place. Even how we reason morally can differ. Think individualistic cultures versus collectivist ones. They might prioritize different things. This has real-world consequences, especially now with globalization. We interact with people who have very different ethical frameworks. Culture influences what values we prioritize when making moral choices. And diversity within societies makes it even more complex, sometimes leading to ethical clashes. So yeah, when we talk about Sorsal, how we chase well-being, how we tackle suffering, you absolutely have to factor in culture.
That brings up a really interesting tension: the individual versus the collective. What's best for me versus what's best for the group. How does Sorsal work when those seem to clash?
That's a classic ethical tightrope walk, isn't it? Societies are always trying to find that balance. We focus a lot on individual well-being, but it's pretty clear our own well-being is often tied up with the health of our community. The idea of self-care can even extend to caring for the collective. You see this tension really clearly in things like public health debates. Measures that help the whole population might limit individual freedom sometimes. Philosophers have argued about individual liberty versus the common good for centuries. Even in any cooperative group, there's that dynamic push and pull between what I want and what's good for us all. So ethically navigating source all means constantly thinking about that balance, how to help individuals flourish while also promoting community well-being.
We've looked at source all through so many lenses: history, philosophy, psychology, culture. What about biology, our physical selves? How does that connect to this drive for well-being and avoiding suffering?
Biologically, you can see suffering as, well, almost an inherent part of life. It's a signal system, right? Telling us something's wrong, a need isn't met, there's harm or potential harm. You could maybe categorize it two ways. There's the basic biological stress response you see in all organisms. And then there's experienced suffering, the conscious awareness of pain, distress in animals with nervous systems like us. Some people even link this biological view to theology, suggesting maybe the capacity to suffer was necessary for evolution, for survival and adaptation. The biopsychosocial model of pain is really important here. It stresses that pain, a key part of suffering, isn't just biological. It's shaped by psychological factors, social factors too. And some argue suffering goes even deeper than the physical, emotional, social, even spiritual or existential levels. There's talk about using biotech to potentially eradicate suffering, but then others push back, saying, well, would we lose meaning? Doesn't suffering sometimes teach us things, make us stronger? Biology tends to look at the survival adaptation function. Theology might explore meaning or redemption through suffering. And neuroscience shows how our genes, our evolution, shape how we're wired to respond to suffering. Think about the stress response at a cellular level, cortisol release, etc. That's a fundamental biological mechanism across species, signaling a threat to well-being. It shows how deep this response to potential suffering runs.
It's a heavy thought, suffering being so fundamental. And it can have such a huge lasting impact, especially if it happens early in life.
Absolutely. Pain or suffering in childhood can cast a long shadow. It can affect identity, emotional health, relationships, even increase risks for things like addiction later. But paradoxically, sometimes facing really tough experiences can lead to what psychologists call post-traumatic growth. People might find inner strength they didn't know they had, see new possibilities, deepen relationships, appreciate life more, maybe even have spiritual growth. Suffering can sometimes foster wisdom, resilience, compassion, a more realistic view of life. Still, we can't ignore the strong link between childhood adversity and long-term health problems, that idea of toxic stress, damaging developing bodies and brains. And early trauma is linked to more physical pain in adulthood, too, possibly through its effects on mood and sleep. Ultimately, human suffering really challenges our search for meaning. We have to find ways to cope, to accept it somehow. And large-scale suffering, like the pandemic, clearly takes a huge toll on well-being, on mental health. Plus, mental health issues stemming from suffering can really limit our freedom, hold us back from developing fully.
This is such a critical, if difficult, part of understanding source all. Okay, let's pivot now to something that feels very future-focused. Artificial intelligence. What role could AI play in how we pursue well-being and try to ease suffering?
AI has huge potential, especially in medicine and healthcare. It could make things more efficient, diagnoses more accurate, help doctors make better treatment decisions, all potentially reducing suffering. And honestly, whether AI ever becomes conscious or not, it's kind of a separate question for now. The immediate focus can be on how it helps alleviate real human suffering. AI might even help us understand suffering better, like by modeling brain processes, maybe seeing frustration as a kind of error signal in how we learn. There's a lot of promise in human-centered AI for things like recognizing pain, maybe even developing empathetic responses in machines, which could change caregiving. We're already seeing AI used for faster diagnostics, therapeutic robots for companionship or assistance, reducing medical errors, helping in surgery or reading scans, even providing virtual care remotely. AI chatbots for therapy are becoming more common too. They offer accessibility, maybe lower cost, and can enhance interventions or automate certain tasks. And this idea of compassionate AI could be really valuable in elder care or palliative care. Beyond healthcare, AI is being explored for all sorts of social good disaster response, economic empowerment, education, environment, equality, health, hunger, even verifying information. Even in companies, AI is being used in wellness programs, personalized health tracking, mental health support for employees.
That sounds incredibly powerful, almost like a potential leap forward in this source all quest. But using such potent tech for something so personal, so sensitive, like well-being and mental health, there have got to be some major ethical hurdles, right?
Oh, absolutely. Huge ones. When AI touches mental health, you immediately worry about things like client confidentiality, data privacy, the risk of breaches. Those are paramount. But it goes broader. Issues of informed consent, do people really understand how AI is being used in their care? Transparency, can see how the AI reaches its conclusions. Accountability, who's responsible if it makes a mistake. And then there's algorithmic bias. If the AI is trained on biased data, it could perpetuate or even worsen inequalities. And just the risk of unintended harm. People are working on regulatory frameworks, but it's complex. A really critical limitation right now is, well, AI lacks that genuine human touch, that empathetic understanding that's so vital in therapy. There's also the risk of misdiagnosis or the black box problem where you don't know why the AI recommended something. And we need to be careful about over-reliance, especially for vulnerable people. Could it make inequities worse? Ongoing challenges include ensuring data quality, rooting out bias, and just maintaining patient trust. Right now, most experts see AI as a tool to help human professionals, not replace them. That human connection is still seen as essential in mental health. And yeah, that deeper question, can a machine actually feel or suffer? That remains unanswered, a big philosophical debate.
Okay, so pulling it all together, SourceAll really does seem like this fundamental, complex drive shaping so much of human life. And AI is this new piece of the puzzle, offering ways to understand it better, maybe even help us achieve its goals, but bringing a whole new set of ethical considerations with it. Let's loop back to some of those specific questions our listener had. First off, when does SourceAll even start?
Well, the evidence points to it starting really early, probably at birth, maybe even before. You see it in those basic survival needs, that fundamental drive to seek nourishment and avoid harm, like an innate appetitive drive to nurture.
And how does it touch all aspects of life?
It really does seem to weave through everything. Our choices about health, physical, mental, our relationships, our work, our careers, our beliefs, how we structure societies. It's a core motivator behind innovation, personal growth, pretty much everything.
What about looking back through time? How does it shape history?
Massively. It drives progress, or what we perceive as progress, efforts to improve quality of life, extend lifespans. It shapes our values, our ethics, how societies evolve over centuries.
And down at the individual biological level, genetics.
Evolution likely shaped genetic predispositions related to our emotional responses, resilience, that basic drive to survive and reproduce. And our biology is the very system that experiences suffering and responds to it.
It even connects to seemingly abstract things like philosophy, physics, math, logic. How?
Well, philosophy directly tackles the nature of well-being and suffering. Physics and math describe the fundamental reality we operate within. Logic is the tool we use to reason about how to navigate that reality towards better states. Our state of mind is our current experience of SourceAll, in a way, and our beliefs give us frameworks to make sense of it all, to cope.
And how does it affect us personally and the people immediately around us?
It drives us to improve our own situation, ease our own suffering, but then empathy extends that outwards, motivating us to care about the well-being of our family, friends, community.
So it's not just internal, it ripples out. How does the world society react to this shared SourceAll drive?
You see it in the structures we build: healthcare systems, social safety nets, laws for justice, ethical codes. These are all fundamentally societal responses aimed at managing suffering and promoting well-being for the collective.
What are some of the biggest ethical implications that bubble up from this SourceAll idea?
They're huge. Questions about our moral obligations to help others, how we distribute resources fairly, is there a right to well-being, and incredibly tough questions around the beginning and end of life.
It's obvious people experience SourceAll very differently. Why the variation in circumstances and outcomes?
It's that complex mix. Genetics play a part, our environment, where and how we grow up, socioeconomic status, access to opportunities, culture shapes values and expectations, and just the unique events and experiences of each person's life. It all interacts.
So what's the basic reality of life then in relation to SourceAll? For humans, maybe other beings too.
It really seems to be this constant interplay. Experiencing both well-being and suffering seems inherent. And alongside that, there's this persistent drive to increase the good stuff and decrease the bad stuff.
And AI's role in human power, our ability to influence SourceAll?
AI could potentially amplify our power through technology that helps us achieve well-being goals or reduce suffering. And it could give us deeper insights into all the factors involved through analysis and modeling.
What about just the physical side, our bodies?
That covers everything from basic biological needs, food, health, to the experience of physical pain or pleasure, and all the body's physiological reactions to the world.
And how does belief fit in? Does it give us freedom in navigating SourceAll?
Belief systems offer frameworks for understanding, coping strategies. They can provide a sense of meaning, purpose, and agency, which definitely impacts how we navigate the challenges and opportunities related to SourceAll.
It's interesting, we don't really have SourceAll 101 in schools, is it?
Well, maybe not using that exact term, but we do teach related concepts indirectly, don't we? Through lessons on ethics, emotional intelligence, health, resilience, coping skills. It's woven into education and upbringing in various ways.
So bottom line, source all seems tangled up with pretty much every single factor of our existence.
That's really what it looks like, a fundamental thread connecting almost every aspect of being human.
Okay, so given how interconnected and fundamental this all is, what are some actual strategies? How can we improve our understanding and, more importantly, maybe actually do something about alleviating suffering?
Education is key, I think. Teaching about well-being, emotional intelligence, ethics, coping skills starting early, fostering empathy and compassion, maybe through social learning, promoting cultural norms that value helping others, tackling systemic inequalities, poverty, discrimination that cause so much suffering is obviously huge. Using technology like AI responsibly, that means strong ethical guidelines, focusing on helping humans, not replacing essential connection, ensuring fair access, promoting holistic views of well-being, mind, body, social connections, maybe even spirit or purpose. Not just focusing on one piece. Supporting people and finding meaning and purpose in their lives builds resilience. And underlying all of it, guiding every intervention with solid ethical principles, fairness, minimizing harm, promoting well-being for everyone.
This has been, well, a truly deep dive. It's incredible how this core human quest for a positive existence, this source all, really has shaped everything, history, society, our own lives.
And it's clearly an ongoing process, isn't it? The idea of constant well-being, zero suffering, that's probably more of an aspiration, something we continuously strive for, rather than a final destination we'll reach.
But maybe as we keep learning through philosophy, science, technology, we get better tools, better understanding to navigate it all, to strive for a more fulfilling future.
Let's hope so.
And maybe something for you, the listener, to think about. How does understanding this source all idea maybe shift how you look at your own daily choices or the bigger human picture? What responsibility do you feel personally in contributing to your own well-being and maybe also to easing suffering around you? Definitely food for thought. Thanks for exploring the depths with us today.
This is DigitView.